And are we on Zoom?
Yeah, we're on Zoom.
Okay, all right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for turning out. Of course, we have a wonderful speaker today, and I'm not going to introduce him. I'm going to let Bromley do the honors, but I'm Sue Hatch, and I'm a member of the seminar committee, and this is Kristen, and we are going to be in charge of the microphones. So what's important is that Dr. Stevenson has told me he's going to allow people to ask questions. He'll ask, are there any questions? So if you do have questions, you need to raise your hand, and then I'll monitor this side, Kristen will monitor that side, and we'll take the microphone to you so that you can speak into the microphone. The reason is not because you're not projecting well enough for everybody in the room to hear, but so that the people on Zoom who've joined us on Zoom can hear, okay? Everybody got that? So just be sure to raise your hand and then wait for one of us to walk over to you. All right, that's it. That's all I got. And we will have Bromley. Come on. Here you go.
I saw a bio slide, so I'm really not going to say anything else other than thank you to the members of the Racial Justice Committee who suggested that I reach out to Dr. Stevenson. Thank him for his wonderful word in our last service. And if you weren't there, though, since many of you are here in person, I think most of you probably were, you should check it out online. And that's all for me, I think. So, oh, you're up. They hear from me all the time.
I like quit. Okay, Yoruba, they believed in what we call transmigration. If they died in the water, their spirit would go back to Africa. And so you have a number of people jumping overboard. It happens so frequently that slave ship technology changed. They began putting nets fore and aft on the ships so that people, if they jumped overboard, they would get caught in the nets. And the reason we know, one of the reasons we know that is because between 1790 and 1794, the British Parliament was trying to figure out why they were losing so much money with these people dying. They weren't concerned about the people, they were concerned about the money. So Parliament began to investigate slave ship captains, travelers, et cetera, trying to find out what was going on. And a couple of things happened. One, excuse me, they created this act called the Dobbins Act because so many people were dying because of what they called tight packing. They had so many people on the ship, they were dying and losing 10%. They wanted to figure out how to fix it. So the Dobbins Act said you can only have one person per ton on your ship. So if you have a 300-ton ship, you have 300 people. At one time, if you had a 300-ton ship, you could have 500 people, knowing you're going to lose 200. But it didn't matter because they were trying to make sure that they made money. So that's kind of how I got into it. Next, in the process of learning more about that, I started studying what we call the transatlantic slave trade database. Out of about 35,000 voyages, there are 5,000 ships that we know at the bottom of the ocean. Many of them sank. Many of them were sank by the captains because oftentimes if the merchants didn't think they would make enough money selling these individuals, they sank the ship. So we have all these ships at the bottom of the ocean. So I'm a diver. I work with an organization called Diving with a Purpose and NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and we try to locate some of these slave ships. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to come to Florida, is because the training I did in marine archaeology and underwater research methods, I did here in Florida. So that's a little bit more about how I do what I do. I also And it's not working. Ready? Got it. Okay, cool. All right, so what's that say? All right. It is important that when the day is over, we feel as though we have dialogue. I'm not here to give a lecture. I'm here to engage in a conversation. One of the problems we have in these United States when it comes to cross ethnicity, cross culture, is we don't talk to one another because we don't know how to talk to one another. And we're fearful of having these conversations because we're afraid of hurting someone's feelings, saying something that is uncomfortable, and so we don't. And so therefore, we don't have the unity and diversity that the body calls for because we don't know how to do it. So a lot of what I do is introduce people into how to have these conversations, okay? I'm convinced that the average person is usually willing to learn new ideas and new ways of thinking if they feel the information is beneficial and not accusatory. In other words, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so I think that part of what God has called me to do is to help people understand why diversity, equity, and inclusion and cultural competency are important, but they're not the same. There's a difference between DE&I and cultural competency. I do trainings for like colleges and universities, police departments, stuff like that. And people are surprised at how I approach it because they are not the same. For instance, this room is diverse. It's diverse, well, a little bit. It's diverse because we have people of different genders, different sexual orientations, etc. That does not necessarily mean it's equity. You tracking with me? It also doesn't mean it's inclusive. Ask the average woman who's working in a high-powered, white male-oriented job if she feels included. It's diverse, but not inclusive, right? And so how do we get around dealing with those kinds of issues? And that's pretty much what we're going to talk about today. I have a video I wanted to show you. Will you be able to pull that up when I get to it? When I get to it, I'll show you. Okay, so diversity without inclusion looks like that, right? It's diverse, but that is not inclusive, right? And when we talk about issues of race and culture, it becomes even more difficult because we tend to conflate culture with ethnicity, right? Culture with race. So if I said to you, how would you define the term race? You would say what? Okay, you need the mics because people are going in. Here we go. You better put sneaks on. Okay, how would you define race? Anyone? You ain't saying that. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
It's a social construct without any scientific basis.
That's it. I'm done. You just messed me up. You got to leave. No. Okay, but you're right. So let's see if we can prove it, right? Let's see if we can prove that. I gotta take this jacket off. I'm having a hot flash right now. So I'm gonna put this on my vest because I'm having a hot flash. And I'll just wear my vest. Okay. All right, let's see if we can prove it. Kappa man. Can I use you in my experiment? All right. Let me sit right there. Can I assume you are of African descent?
You can assume it.
I can assume that. Okay.
Yes, that's a fair assumption.
Okay. Reverend, can I use you? Okay. Can I assume that you're Caucasian?
Yes.
All right. So Reverend Bromley sends me his email, invites me to come, and what's your name again, sir?
Ron,
Ron reads the email and says, I got to come hear this guy because he's really off the chart, right? So he's trying to get here. Reverend Bromley is coming, and she's running a little bit late. He's running late. He hits her with the car. So now she's laying out in the street. She's got to go to the hospital. The doctor says she needs a blood transfusion, right? So we have an African or African descendant race, and we have a Caucasian race. The doctor says that Reverend Bromley needs a transfusion. And we discover that she is B negative. Brother Ron says, you know, I hit her with the car. I'm also B negative. I want to share my blood. Can they share blood?
Sure.
But they're different races. It doesn't matter. Okay, if it doesn't matter,
It's your own.
we live in the same neighborhood. Why has race separated us when it came to marriage and finances? And if it doesn't matter, because it's a construct. It has nothing to do with biology. The problem is we are raised in an environment where we use this paradigm called the inferiority paradigm. And that inferiority paradigm suggests that white male heteronormativity is the standard and anything under that doesn't work. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with access and exposure. Someone asked me, how many degrees are you allowed to have? Because I have a, but it's coming out, right? As many as I want, right? But if I'm not in a bow tie and a suit, I'm on my motorcycle and it's warm and I got my sons out, guns out, you don't see a PhD. People will judge me based on what I look like. And so one of the difficulties in creating these diverse environments is we're so fixated on what we see, right? And in firearm states, we call that target fixation. You look at a target and you get fixed on it. When you're driving, you can fixate on a target and end up hitting it if you don't take your eyes away from it. So it's important to think about how we see each other. Because until we're able to see people from the inside out, if in fact the Holy Spirit lives in us and we're all created by God to be in the body, then the outside doesn't matter. Does that make sense? All right, questions or comments? Okay, now here's the video. Can you pull that up on me? You love it. God. You didn't need me. Am I up? Do I need to be in the camera? Do I need to be in the camera? Okay, good.
Is it on YouTube?
Yes, it's YouTube. Yes, go to YouTube and then type in what kind of Asian are you? You have a stool or something like that? I played a tennis tournament yesterday and I sprained my knee. I'm getting too old for this stuff. That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. This I can sit for a minute. You know, I'm 71. I'm playing with these guys in their 40s. They running me all over the place. I'm like, you know what? Don't hit the ball so hard now. I'm getting too old for this. You can't get it? Yeah. What kind of Asian are you? Asian. ASIAN.
Oh, you got it.
So why they pull that? Right. See? Right, right. So why they hooking that up? So the purpose of this video is to set up my next argument. And my next argument is this, that race is a disease. Racism is a disease. And it's similar to COVID. One, millions of people had died because of race. You can have it and not know it. You can be asymptomatic. Amen. You got it? Okay.
But a mask doesn't work.
Well, see, here's the deal. There are people who didn't want to wear the mask. But one argument is in order to overcome COVID, we had to have herd immunity. So the more people who know it's a social construct, the less people will be affected by the disease, right? We would hope. So how do we get to that point? Well, I think as we look at this video, we'll ask some questions and do some dialogue and figure out what steps can be taken. Oh, here's the other part. Oh, I said already. You can be asymptomatic. There are people who make racist statements and they're not racist at all. Sometimes they're complimentary. I gave a lecture at the University of Connecticut on some of my research. And one of the persons came up to me afterward. They said, Dr. Stevenson, man, you are that was amazing. And you speak so well. Like, well, I got 5 degrees. I should be able, I don't know, maybe, right? Right? Now, here's the point. That was meant to be complimentary, right? That's making me work. But you're right. Okay, you ready? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's like, you run well for a girl.
Right. You got it? You know, I have my computer if you want me to plug into your HDMI.
Problem. Hearing is perfect.
There you go. We speak English there.
Where are you from?
Orange County, but I never actually lived there
I mean, before
before I was born.
that. Well, where are your people from?
Well, my great grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Teriyaki barbecue place. Ah, I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
Where are you from? Really? You're Native American?
Just regular American. Well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Relationship are. That's the great thing. Yeah.
Great.
Where do you think, anybody? You know where I'm from. Wrong. I'm from Brazil,
Okay.
and I do that game because I used to when I was in. It's not working. Okay, all right, it is working. And when I was working at a restaurant, because of my accent, people would be like, "Where are you from?" And I would say, "Where do you think I'm from?" And then they were like, oh, Germany, Switzerland, France. I had Texas, South Carolina. That was me. And then I had one person who said Brazil. And oh, I've been to Brazil and I know this and that. So yeah, it's interesting.
Brazil has the largest population of people of African descent outside of the continent. 4.5 million Africans were transported to Africa to Brazil during the slave trade, right? Because of sugar. We'll talk about that later. But the question is he racist? Or is he ignorant? Because the question is this: how does he start the conversation?
Where are you from? Whether.
He says, your English is perfect. Where are you from? What was his assumption?
He was from Florida.
But why? Because she didn't look like how she sounded, right? Now, can we fault people for that? I wouldn't have known you were from Brazil because of what you look like, right? And again, it goes back to this notion of fixation on targets, right? That we're trained to judge people on how they look. But then she says to him, where are you from? He says, San Francisco. But where are you from? He says, well, my grandparents were from England. But before he says that, she says, you're Native American? He says, no, I'm regular American, right? What? What is regular American, right? Okay. That's where we get the white male heteronormative idea. Yes, sir. You think he's prejudiced?
He is prejudiced.
Okay. Okay. One says he's prejudiced. I think he's trying to hit on her. I think, I think he's trying to get a little something, what your digits, what's your IG. You know how they do nowadays. They don't ask for phone numbers no more. You got to have an ID or a Facebook page. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I had an experience like that just last week. I was doing college tours with my daughter, who is American, regular American, and she's 16. And I was in UGA, just we are getting something to, like a snack. And then I go through the line and there's an Asian person in the cashier, and I started talking to her, and I did hear an accent, and I asked her, where are you from? And she said, I am from China. And I said, or actually she said, I'm from Korea, actually. And then I'm like, oh, do you know what what year of Chinese New Year is this year? And my daughter looked at me like I was from another planet. And then I said, and I looked at her and she's like, of course I do. It is blah, blah, dragon, whatever it was. I don't know. Or, I should know or something like that because, she was trying to remember or whatever. And then we started a conversation about, and all my intent was to ask her about her experiences as a person coming to this country and being an immigrant and just having a conversation. And then my daughter afterwards was like, that was racist, Mom.
Now,
and I had a conversation with her and I was like, I'm like, was it?
And that the first part of what you said is important. It's not the question, it's the intent.
Yeah.
Right? Are you asking the question because you think that person is inferior? Or are you asking the question because you don't know? I started out by saying one of the reasons we don't have these conversations because we don't know how to do it. Now, why is it important? Because if they start taking all these books out of school, it's going to get even worse.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we don't realize how important other people's contributions have been to our lives, we'll just dismiss it. I'll give you an example. Anybody use a GPS system? GPS? Do you know who was the founder of who created the GPS system?
Woman.
A Black woman by the name of Dr. Gladys West, right? Because men don't know where we're going. We don't know where we're going.
Not gonna stop there.
We're not going to stop. We're going to keep on going until we end up in Easter Blip, right? But right, right. But Gladys West, an African American scientist, created the GPS system. Now, here's the point. Why don't we know that? You tracking with me? So diversity and inclusion also is important because it demonstrates how connected we are, right? The second thing I want to say about him is he conflated Korean. He says he loves kimchi and teriyaki. Not the same, right? So he's demonstrating a certain level of ignorance, but not necessarily malice. And I think that oftentimes when we want to engage with other people, because there's such a tension, especially nowadays, we miss opportunities of making investments. Where's Reverend Brownlee?
It's gone.
I got an email from her, right? Inviting me to come preach at your church. And so the first thing I did was I Googled y'all. Because I want to know where I'm going, right? And I looked around the congregation and said, man, ain't nobody that look like me in the place. I don't know. I didn't say that. Because I think it would be a violation of how I understand the person of God to look at this group and say, I don't want to go there. If I really love God, if I'm really a person of the scriptures, then I have to believe that difference does not mean bad or wrong. It just means different. And how much of a blessing have you been to me today simply by inviting me? I mean, people shook my hands, they gave me hugs, somebody had me kiss them on both sides to be balanced, right? But suppose I hadn't come, right? But the intent of Reverend Brownlee's heart was such that when I met with her, I knew I had to come. And one of the things that we have to be able to do as people is recognize that each of us invest in each of our lives, no matter how minute or magnanimous it may be. We all have the ability to make an investment. Why do I do this? Because this is not about bashing or harming or blaming or finding anyone guilty. However, it's hard work. It's hard work. You know, I call and get reservations at a restaurant when I lived in Grand Rapids, and I get to the restaurant and I say, "You from Grand Rapids?"
I'm from Michigan.
What part? My wife is from Michigan. Say again?
Michigan? Sorry.
I'm a Spartan, and y'all just won a championship. Yeah, it's a little school, yeah. Ain't a big deal. You know, I had no idea about the rivalry until I moved there. I moved there from California. But I called this restaurant to have lunch. And I called it because I used to, when I taught a course in African American Studies, and the students who got A's in my course, at the end of the semester, I would take them to this restaurant called Leo's. Matter of fact, I proposed at my wife at that restaurant. Yeah, she made me do it twice. And so we get to the restaurant and I say to the young lady, you have reservations for Dr. Stevenson? And she looks around and says, yes, is he here? Now, again, I don't think she was being malicious, but it didn't cross her mind that Dr. Stevenson might not be white. You tracking with me? Because there's a certain level of conditioning that we learn from a very young age. Are you familiar with the doll test? Okay, that's coming up. So anyway, all right. So one, I want you to understand that what we're trying to do here is to create a space where we do the work, because the relationships that cross cultures and cross ethnicities is work. It doesn't just happen, especially in our climate. But yes, sir.
Again, it goes back to what I said about prejudice. We all are prejudiced. We have prejudged other people. We have prejudged the situation we're in. And like you're saying, that's a part of necessity. We have adapted by developing prejudices.
You're right. But does it have to be malicious? You follow me? I don't think he's being malicious.
Condescension.
So how far back can I go?
We're saying that we all have certain levels of prejudice, but it doesn't have to be malicious.
Part of that.
Absolutely.
In that case, condescension is malicious.
But we're not talking about condescension. We're talking about prejudice. I'm saying that you can, for instance, let me give you an example. You tell me if I'm tracking with you. So I ride a motorcycle. I have a Harley. And I also have 13 tattoos. So when I'm on my bike and someone sees me on that motorcycle, they tend not to assume I'm a professor and a former pastor. That is prejudging me. That's not necessarily malicious. That's based on the context of me being on a motorcycle with tattoos all over the place. The only difference is all my tattoos are scripture. And I did that when I started doing motorcycle ministry because people were riding bikes and they wouldn't come to church. I said, well, why don't you come to church? Well, we don't have church clothes. I said, okay, let's do church outside where you can ride the motorcycle. The point is that we can prejudge people without being prejudiced. The problem is when we prejudge and we place them in a place of inferiority. And that's when condescension and malice becomes a problem. Does that make sense?
You have a point, though.
That's your prerogative. That's your prerogative. Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the things that I've become more conscious of is in the when white people look at Black people and they're not around many white people and there's a crime and now I'm being asked to there's a lineup and I'm supposed to identify somebody, and the studies that have shown both ways that my ability to discern individuals based on my lack of accommodation or being around those people. I remember going on a cruise one time, and when you live around here, I see Asian people on the Eastern United States, and I've always thought, are they Chinese or are they Japanese? And all of a sudden I'm on this cruise and there are tons of these Japanese families, and I'm realizing I had no idea all of a sudden it became clear to me. But there are lots of times when people are not aware that their lack of familiarity with people in a certain group can wind up causing such injustice. I just want to make that clear.
You're right. It's about exposure, right? If we're not exposed to different cultures, if we're not exposed to different ethnicities, if we're not exposed to different food, for instance, who knows what a griot is? G-R-I-O-T. Yes, ma'am.
A wise person, a seer. There you go.
Okay. They're historians, storytellers, wise, G-R-I-O-T, right? Not in Haiti. It's food.
Yeah.
When you talk about the word griot or griot, it's food. So even language may differ based on culture. So if you're not accustomed to crossing these cultures, you're right, you're going to respond in a certain kind of way. So the question is, how do we fix that? Right? How do we fix it, right? What can we learn from the interaction? Why do you think he mentioned he likes sushi? How do you think she felt having to explain her heritage? What did he mean by I'm regular American? All those are good questions, right? The problem is, unless we find ourselves in these isolated situations of conversations, it tends not to happen. And what it does with media, news, politics, it just broadens the gap. And we get further and further away from one another. And I want to argue, especially in the body of Christ, that we got to fix that. So race, ethnicity, and culture are not synonyms. We just said that race is a social construct. But what is culture? Say again? Is culture a social construct? You think so? Eating chicken. It's culture. Yeah, no? Greens, right? Locks, right? Wearing a tie, culture. Those have nothing to do with race, right? It has to do, there is an academic culture. You got to take tests, you got to read books, you got to come to class. That's a culture, right? Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the questions that you just had and looking at the scenario of why he made that comment about liking sushi, if we think about how we are just on a timeline recently out of the cave, we are still operating under the us and them mentality that when we are out in a strange place, we are trying to find something in common. So he tried to make a common thing. I like something that I think you like.
Exactly.
But that idea to recognize that we all have prejudices. Food. If it didn't come from Publix, is it safe to eat? I had a friend in high school that we talked about going home to make French fries, and she's like, where do you get them? I thought you'd get them at McDonald's.
Right.
So just that basic thing, all through this, I'm just keeping thinking of this us and them mentality and how we need to face that.
That's
first.
good. I want to go back to something you said something I think is interesting now. So he felt comfortable enough to ask the question, right? Where are you from? He also felt comfortable enough to be vulnerable. I like teriyaki, I like sushi, and I figured Korean or Japanese. So he's being transparent, right? We have a hard time doing that. We don't want people to know who we really are. Matter of fact, when I first met my wife, right? I thought she's kind of hot. I figured, I wasn't concerned about her phone number until I figured out what her credit score was. Just kidding. But point out, I'm like, I could be broke by myself. That's kidding. But the point is, the first time we met, I see him. I told you I belonged to a motorcycle club, and so we had this birthday party, and she came over and offered me some cake. And hey. And so I thought she was kind of nice, so I sent her a drink. Now I hadn't dated in a minute, and I send this drink, and then I said, "Damn, what did I just do?" And I left. And then I realized, shit, I just paid $11. I should at least get a phone number, right? Now here's the point. I had not been exposed to the dating scene for a long period of time. So I was really kind of nervous of what to do in the process. Eventually I came back, we met, we talked and so on. And a couple of days later, we went out for lunch, and she had to go to a meeting and I had to go to a meeting, but her car was under repair. So I gave her my truck. 2 days, right? Because I mean, if she steals my truck, obviously she ain't the one, right? So right? But I grew up in a family where you help people out and you trust they're going to do the right thing. And one of the things I love about my wife is she does for others and she expects people to do what she would do. Oftentimes she is disappointed, but the truth is, if you think that I'm doing the right thing and others will do the right thing, it makes you more willing to be transparent and vulnerable. Many of us are not there. We're guarded for whatever the reason, right? One here and then one here. And so until we figure out how to let these guards down, because sometimes when you get them down, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get your heart broken. She's going to take my truck, right? Right? But then you might meet those people or that person that doesn't take your truck, that they do appreciate who you are. They will invite you in. They will be your friend, and so on and so on. So we got to work towards that. We only got a couple minutes. We got 10 minutes. Jesus, on the main line. Time flies. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. We're good.
Well, sorry, I'm not gonna help you with that timing thing because I have a lot of my mind right now sort of exploding, but I was listening to NPR, I think day ago or something, and they were talking about Fred Rogers. I just got a little snippet of it. And he talked about, well, the guy was a writer and he was writing a book about Fred Rogers and how he, neighbor of everybody, right? I started listening and then the writer said himself, I decided that I'm not going to put any political signs in my lawn anymore or ever. And the reasons are these, because I do want to be open to everybody coming to talk to me and not have this, and I'm like, I'm 50 something. And this is I'm from Brazil and my culture is different, even though my grandfather and my father was American, mother Polish. So there were a lot of other cultures involved, but, and I'm pretty open. My husband hates it. He's from the Midwest. He doesn't understand me in that way. He understands me in other ways, but, but he's political science and he's very guarded in his political views. And I'm like, he said to me, he didn't want to put the sign of a Democratic friend anymore. And I said, okay, my solution is we're not going to put anything else. And this is, now I understand why.
Yeah.
And anyways, how that connects to race, I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah.
But there is something there,
Yeah.
right? And how you view other people from other cultures and other races and other whatevers and how to be open for everything.
Yeah. I want to make, I see your hand. Jim here. Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to do a second part of this?
Yeah.
Because we're not going to get this done today. I'm telling you right now. Absolutely. I'd be glad to come back because it's been fun. Okay. So yes, sir. And I'll come back. I'll come back
Yes.
to what you just said.
Talking about cultures and about prejudice, what I see is a political culture. I mean, I was part of Monsanto for a little while. I didn't like their culture. I didn't want the corporate culture. I joined the U.S. government to work as a scientist for them. Anyway, cultures are, what happens, I think, often is that a culture, like some of our political culture, has an attitude, like I told your wife, that it's a divide and conquer attitude and a win at all costs attitude. And that type of culture helps to make use of the prejudices that exist.
Right.
And that strengthens, there's a feedback loop there, and it strengthens a group culture that can be extremely prejudiced and full of malice.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I want to just do one more thing before we go. Okay. Because we're not going to get it done today. And I don't want to rush through it. And I appreciate what you just said. But I think it's important that we do a couple different kinds of things in our own personal lives if we're serious about this diversity, equity, inclusion thing, right? There are three basic reasons for America's racial and sexual quandary. One, we are historically undereducated. You would be surprised how much we really don't know, right? And one of the reasons I became a historian is because when I was a kid, I played baseball for a church called St. Augustine Methodist Church. So when I went to seminary, I had to write a graduate paper. And I wanted to write about St. Augustine because the church, and I've figured out. But I always thought he was white. You know, he was an African. St. Augustine was the Bishop of Hippo. He was African. I was so mad when I find out that all these years I thought he was a white guy. Not that was a bad thing, but why did they tell me he was African, right? What was it about him being African that they kept out of the textbooks?
Credibility.
You know, well, yeah, whatever, right? But we wouldn't even understand the Trinity if it wasn't for him. He wrote most of the documents that helps us understand the Trinity. The point I'm trying to make, and we'll start bringing it to a close, is if we're going to lie about something like that, there are no bounds. And if we start taking books away and preventing teachers from teaching, and where is this world going and where are we going? And what as Christians are we supposed to do? What is our responsibility to make sure that the society we live in is not only educated, but loving and safe? If we're not doing it, the world's not going to do it because they don't see it as a responsibility. And I say that we are undereducated. We tend not to discuss issues that don't affect us. If it ain't my problem, I ain't worrying about it. People don't want to be blamed or accused, and we don't have the linguistic tools. Where you from? I like sushi and teriyaki. Yeah. Right? Right? And so those are fundamental. They're fundamental. They're fundamental to building a diverse and equitable, inclusive environment. So we take this one last statement and then I'll shut it down.
I just wanted to add one other thing that has come up for me. So as my education about the social construct of race has increased, another thing has happened for me, which is that the more that I've learned about the harm that people that look like me have perpetuated in the world of race and that I have inadvertently perpetuated, I think of it as a phase in my learning, but I've found that I've gotten much quieter, which is probably a good thing, but it also means I've hesitated to ask questions sometimes and to speak up sometimes in the fear that I'll perpetuate more harm.
Sure.
And so there's this period of I'm not engaging in the dialogue unless I'm in very safe environments with people that I have built trust with. And sometimes I'll give you an example. I grew up in the Alachua County school system, in all these schools, but I was in the magnet programs and the gifted programs, and it was deeply segregated. And I even experienced it and knew it a little bit when I was younger, but it wasn't until I was older and really started to see what it was. And then I opened a school and I ran a school for 8 years, serving children in East Gainesville. And it was the first time in my whole history of living in this community that I was in close community with people who didn't look like me, parents, children, and then as many staff as I could possibly hire and teachers as I could hire who didn't look like me to try to have representation. And suddenly I found a community where I was able to build trust and safety with people who didn't look like me. And in those environments, I felt like I could have more authentic conversations once I built that trust. But in others where I don't have the trust, I find that I'm quieter. And I want to get to where I feel confident enough. And I think it's just more learning and more education, but to say the things, to ask the questions, and to build that dialogue, to to
Right.
change what's been happening all these years, but it's been so I feel like for me, there's a fourth.
Yeah,
I don't want to cause harm, not just, I
There
don't
you
want to
go.
be blamed. I don't want to hurt somebody else.
that's the cultural competency part.
Yeah.
And see, that's why you gotta come back. Right. So give yourself a hand. Thank you so much. Hope it helped. Thank you.